The Kindari system, once a vibrant hub of trade and diplomacy, simply vanished. No screams, no emergency broadcasts, just a blank spot where 5 thriving planets had once spun around a golden white star. The Concord's early detection satellites registered a brief spike in gravitational flux, a distortion so profound it unraveled the quantum mesh of the local spacetime grid. Then nothing. The signal stopped. Every model failed to predict it. Every simulation contradicted the next. The Kindari were gone. In the High Concord Assembly Hall, an impossibly vast structure suspended within a Dyson lattice above the galactic core, dozens of advanced species gathered in tense silence. Representatives of hive minds, fluidic consciousnesses, and crystalline collectives pulsed uneasily. Their fractal thought forms flickered with static. Even the most rational among them could no longer ignore it. The Skirn Anomaly had returned, and it had evolved. Motion is void, spoke the holographic fractal that represented the Isari collective. Projection matrices no longer cohere. This is not an attack, buzzed the sentient magnetic field of the Valari swarm. It is a logic breach, an ontological failure. The Skirn unweaves the assumptions upon which our reality stands. At the far edge of the room, barely acknowledged, sat a small delegation of humans. Earth's inclusion in the Galactic Concord was only a decade old, seen as a kind of interstellar charity for a young, bumbling species still barely past its adolescence. Their technology was clunky, their social systems fragmented, and their models, well, embarrassingly imprecise. Dr. Aria Sen tapped her stylus nervously against a slate tablet, watching the swirling models projected in the center of the chamber. None held for more than a few seconds before dissolving into noise. She'd read the briefings. The Skirn wasn't just a black hole, or a rogue AI, or even a temporal weapon. It was something else. Something that bent not just matter and energy, but meaning. A Concord elder named Zenkar floated forward. His form, a semi-luminous lattice of protoplasma, pulsed with thought. He was older than many stars, and, unlike most of his peers, he had a peculiar interest in young species, especially chaotic ones. The anomaly is accelerating, Zenkar said, his voice like bells underwater. We have lost 3 more systems since Kindari. Logical countermeasures fail. Predictive matrices disintegrate. We are blind. Reboot the axiomatic core, suggested a member of the Cori Mathemancy. Reassess the fundamental laws. They're being rewritten as we speak, Zenkar replied. Not broken. Overwritten. Aria raised her hand, timidly. No one looked. She lowered it. Hours passed. Debates spiraled, full of syllogistic knots and recursive loops. It was like watching genius minds drown in their own brilliance. For every elegant proposition floated, the anomaly responded by dissolving the conditions of its logic. Like a cosmic trickster, it punished certainty and devoured precision. After the session adjourned, Zenkar drifted silently into the observation deck overlooking the anomaly's last known vector. From there, one could see the dark ribbon threading through the galactic arm, like a scar across the stars. His form dimmed in contemplation. Do you really believe it's conscious? Aria's voice broke the silence behind him. He turned, a flicker of amusement passing through his energy shell. Your species believes in many things it cannot prove. Yet here you are, asking the right question. Aria stepped closer, the stars reflected in her eyes. If it is conscious, then it's reacting, which means it has preferences, patterns. And if it's not, Zenkar asked, then we're still wasting time trying to outlogic a force that doesn't obey our rules. He regarded her, silent for a moment. Your Earth models, they're messy, redundant, illogical. They double back on themselves. Some are based on dreams. They're built for chaos. Trial, error, adapt. We iterate until something works, then we figure out why. Zenkar pulsed slowly. I watch your kind split the atom without understanding quantum decoherence. You built rockets with slide rules. You used metaphors to model neural networks. It's not science, it's madness. Yeah, Aria said, but maybe madness is what this thing understands. Zenkar, turned back to the stars. Behind his translucent body, the void shimmered, a soft ripple that didn't belong in space. A prelude, perhaps, to another erasure. Humanity, he said softly, may be the only species irrational enough to survive this. It wasn't that they hated humans. They just didn't take them seriously. In the mind palace of the Concord, Earth's delegation quarters were modest, even by human standards. Most species preferred virtual or symbolic space, rendered as fractal temples or crystalline forests. Humanity got what looked like a retrofitted waiting room. Beige walls, flickering panels, coffee machines that produce sludge no species should drink. A polite afterthought. Still, Dr. Aria Sen made the most of it. She stood before a whiteboard. Not a simulation, not a hologram, but an honest-to-God whiteboard, scribbling equations with a black marker, half of them crossed out, the rest circled with notes like WTF and Ask Raj. Behind her, a pile of analog tools, slide rules, graph paper, even a pocket full of dice. "I'm telling you," she said, turning to her team, "we're missing something because we're trying too hard to solve it." Rajesh Patel, a computational linguist turned anomaly theorist, looked up from a notebook filled with doodles and syntax trees. "So what, we vibe with it instead?" Arya grinned. "Kind of, yeah. You realize how that sounds, right?" Asked Commander Tanya Briggs, former astronaut and now the team's security liaison. "We're up against a cosmic reality eater, and your plan is to freestyle?" "No, I'm saying the anomaly doesn't follow rules. At least, not rules we recognize. So we need to create rules that it responds to. Think of it like jazz. Structured chaos. Improvised order." Tanya threw up her hands. "We're the bottom rung of this ladder, Arya. We just got invited to the Galactic potluck and showed up with instant noodles." "Instant noodles slap," Raj muttered. "Besides," Arya said, "have you seen the Concord's latest models? 30 civilizations, all with superluminal computation, and not one of them has even slowed the anomaly. It's like their logic actually feeds it." At that moment, the door opened and a familiar shimmer drifted in. Zenkar, his glow dimmer than usual. "Your presence has been requested," he said without preamble. "You are to present your methods to the Concord Scientific Tribunal." Aria's stomach dropped. "You're kidding." "I do not kid," Zenkar replied, "though I find your species' fascination with absurdist humor intriguing." The tribunal chamber was a kaleidoscope of alien intellect. A sentient storm hovered in one corner, its voice booming as thunder. A council of neural lichens blinked slowly from across the table. At the center, a quasar being known as Zeritvel presided. "Earth delegation," Zerit's voice echoed, bending in and out of dimensional harmonics. "You may explain your approach." Arya stepped forward, heart hammering. She placed a small, wheeled whiteboard at the center of the floor. A ripple of confusion passed through the room. "We believe the Skirn Anomaly is not a purely physical phenomenon," she began. "It's partially perceptual, possibly informational. It changes in response to observation, but not in ways consistent with quantum mechanics or probabilistic collapse. Instead, it behaves as if it responds to narrative." "Define narrative," someone barked telepathically. "A framework of cause and effect that doesn't require logic, just coherence," Arya said. "We've started building models that are intentionally inconsistent, but emotionally resonant. Our latest simulations use analog components, randomness generators, and interpretive heuristics." "You mean guesses?" interrupted a being composed entirely of logic gates. "Yes," Arya said proudly. "Wild, chaotic, intuitive guesses. We've even been modeling with myth analogs, trickster archetypes, dualities, paradox engines. And the anomaly reacts. It hesitates. It shifts." There was silence, then a burst of collective mental laughter. It rippled across the room like a wind through tall glass. "You are proposing," said a voice soaked in disdain, "to confront the most dangerous force in the galaxy with storytelling and dice rolls." "Yes," Raj piped up from the back, holding up a 20-sided die. "With modifiers." The laughter grew louder. One species projected a dramatic reenactment of a human hurling spaghetti at a black hole. Aria felt the weight of their derision, but didn't back down. We're not trying to defeat the anomaly with science it doesn't understand. We're trying to meet it where it lives. In chaos. Zenkar floated closer to Zeretvel. They have already diverted a microfracture of the Skirn's leading edge using one of their— what did you call it? A nonsense field, Aria supplied. A nonsense field, Zenkar repeated. It collapsed a rising instability zone by confusing it. Or maybe entertaining it, Raj added. The tribunal fell into stunned silence. Zeret's core dimmed momentarily. You may continue your experiments, but understand, if your chaos infects our predictive infrastructure, Earth will be severed from the Concord. Understood, Aria said. As the humans left the chamber, a few Concordians watched them with new eyes. Not respect, not yet, but something close to curiosity. In the corridor, Tanya exhaled. We just became the galaxy's court jesters. Aria grinned. Then let's give them a show worth watching. They called it the Human Error Protocol as a joke. At first, the name stuck after the third successful test. What began as a slapdash suite of unpredictable analog programs, built from duct tape processors, randomized variable sets, and symbolic logic trees, had become Earth's only real contribution to galactic science. Not because it worked the way anything was supposed to, but because it didn't. Aria stood before the latest iteration of the model, a floating, semi-holographic mass of swirling inkblot shapes, scattered dice, and glitching poetry fragments scrolling across outdated LED strips. She turned to her team. Okay, walk me through this again. Slowly, Raj tapped a notepad filled with half-sketches and musical notation. So we fed the anomaly's recent waveform into a chaotic feedback loop built on 20th century pseudo-random number generators. Then we matched its output against a database of contradictory mythological archetypes, mostly tricksters, shapeshifters, paradox beings. Anomaly started pulsing in response, Tanya added, like it was curious or pissed. Hard to say. Then, Raj continued, we introduced a spontaneous contradiction into the loop, a self-refuting algorithm written entirely in palindromes. And it changed course. By 7 degrees. Aria stared at them. You realize what that means? Raj grinned. Yeah, it listens to nonsense. No, Aria said. It responds to internal contradiction. That's not just random. That's adaptive. Reactive. Maybe even intelligent. Or it's just allergic to Earth philosophy, Tanya muttered. They'd created a model that thrived on failure. The protocol was constantly updated with misfires, unpredictable outcomes, and the bizarre patterns they revealed. Every failed simulation became fuel for the next one. Instead of searching for a clean answer, the team embraced inconsistency, paradox, and absurdity. The messier the model, the more accurate it became. So naturally, the rest of the Concord hated it. Their next presentation was hosted in a hybrid simulation zone where the Concord's elite minds could exist as thought forms, unbound by form. The Earth delegation, ever analog, entered as they were flesh and blood in a digital sea. Proceed, came the voice of Zernathol, a multidimensional philosopher engine from the Orvan depths. Aria gestured to their floating chaos engine. It looked like a pile of mistakes wrapped in a fever dream. What you see here is not a solution, she began. It's a learning engine, one that builds itself out of failure. She tapped a button. A randomized simulation began. Each cycle, the protocol introduces contradictions, analog interference, and even emotional inputs, fear, awe, humor. It doesn't seek truth. It seeks resonance. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. You abandon precision, one entity accused. You worship chaos. We don't worship anything, Aria said. We just accept that the Skirn might be something logic alone can't confront. It is chaos, or maybe it wants it. So we stop fighting. We engage it on its own terms. Through storytelling, through pattern breaking, through surprise. Tanya stepped forward. You all keep trying to outthink Storm. We're trying to dance in the rain. There was silence. Then, Zenkar floated forward. Let them show you. The test site was an abandoned mining system, 3 dead planets orbiting a sun in its final days. A rift was opening nearby, the leading edge of the Skirn Anomaly, twisting reality like paper soaked in oil. The anomaly devoured laws as it moved. Physics bent. Math failed. The Concord had stationed fleets here before. They vanished. Now was Earth's turn. The Human Era Protocol was deployed from a heavily modified transport ship, retrofitted with archaic Earth hardware. Vinyl records spun next to optical coils. Mechanical arms scribbled contradictory equations in the air. Aria sat in the control chair, watching the data distort in real time. Skirn's about to enter test radius, Tanya said over comms. Engage protocol, Aria ordered. The machine hummed. Lights flickered. The engine began emitting sequences that made no sense. Recursive musical tones, poetic algorithms, fragments of ancient Earth mythology. Then the Skirn paused, just for a moment. Enough for the team to record a measurable dip in its forward momentum. Not a retreat, not even confusion, but acknowledgement. Aria felt it, like the anomaly was tilting its head. Raj muttered, "We just got noticed by a thing that erases stars." "Do it again," Aria said. They triggered a burst of raw improvisation, unfiltered emotion, dreams, metaphors fed through outdated synthesizers. The anomaly shifted slightly and stopped expanding. The data poured in. Impossible readings, backward time spikes, quantum echoes of non-events. And beneath it all, a rhythm, buried in the chaos, a pulse. Not random, not entirely. Interactive. It was alive and listening. Hours later, back at Concord HQ, the results were undeniable. Earth's chaos engine had not only survived contact, it had altered the Skirn's behavior, something none of the galaxy's greatest minds had achieved. The backlash was immediate. Some Concord species accused Earth of corrupting the fabric of inquiry. Others demanded the shutdown of the Human Error Protocol for its unethical randomness. But a growing number whispered something new. Hope. In corridors where once no one spoke to humans, emissaries now approached with curiosity. "How did you think of this?" a crystalline diplomat asked Aria. "We didn't," she replied. "We tried everything that didn't work until something almost did. Then we broke that and tried again." And so, the protocol expanded. It was no longer a joke. It was the galaxy's best chance. They were no longer running experiments. They were going in. The Skirn Anomaly loomed across the void like a jagged tear in the fabric of reality, wider than a solar system and deeper than light. Its edges shimmered with paradox. Stars bent toward it and vanished, only to reappear for a flicker of time elsewhere. Probes failed. AI screamed nonsense before dying. Whole fleets had dissolved into memory. But the Human Error Protocol hadn't just survived. It had caught the Skirn's attention. Now, Earth had a plan. If the Skirn couldn't be predicted, it had to be engaged. Not as a weapon or a virus, but as a living phenomenon. A consciousness. A puzzle whose answer wasn't logic but understanding. And understanding demanded presence. "Tell me again," Commander Tanya Briggs said, strapping herself into the mission chair. "How exactly do we make contact with a reality-devouring meta-entity using jazz?" "Not just jazz," Aria replied, flipping switches on a board half-filled with analog dials and antique samplers. Improvised neural feedback loops, mythic pattern seeding, and chaos-synced storytelling, which is the science-wide way of saying jazz. Exactly. The ISS Daedalus, the first and only ship outfitted to be part vessel, part symbol, drifted slowly toward the Skirn's event veil. Its structure was infused with metaphor, each corridor mapped not to physical blueprints, but narrative functions. The navigation system was a hybrid between dream logic and recursive algorithms. There were no weapons, only instruments. Literally. In the forward chamber, Raj tuned a worn-out sitar connected to the ship's harmonic field. Across from him, an AI poet recited randomized Earth legends into the anomaly's vector feed. Every signal the ship emitted was part of a symphony, equal parts art, noise, memory, and math. The Skirn pulsed ahead like a wound that refused to heal. "Crossing the veil in 60 seconds, Tanya said. No turning back. Good, Aria whispered. It's time to see if the universe really wants to talk. The moment the deadless passed into the anomaly, space inverted. Not metaphorically. Inside the Skirn, light moved sideways. Gravity wrapped around sound. Time splintered, stitched itself back together, and smiled. The crew's senses became unreliable, so they relied on metaphor. Breath deep, Raj said, adjusting the ship's sensory matrix. We're floating in something like thought, and it was. Around them were fragments of impossible things, stars inside flowers, entire cities folding and unfolding like paper cranes, echoes of forgotten gods screaming lullabies. The Skirn wasn't a void. It was consciousness without a body. Run protocol, Aria said. The ship began its performance. Chaos patterns streamed from every surface. Analog code contradicted itself mid-sequence. The AI poet screamed an ode to Schrodinger's cat, then wept a lullaby about quantum love. Instruments played themselves. The Skirn reacted. It coalesced into a shape. Humanoid, faceless, built from equations that dissolved when stared at directly. You're watching us, Aria whispered. No, Raj said slowly. It's mirroring us. Every output from the human error protocol, the Skirn duplicated, twisting it, amplifying it, testing its emotional resonance. For every fragment of nonsense Earth sent, the anomaly responded with layered meaning. Fractal replies. Recursive poetry. It wasn't a monster. It was a test. A cosmic mechanism designed not to destroy, but to disrupt predictability, to expose brittle systems, tear down stagnant intellects, and rebuild understanding through adaptation. It's a crucible, Aria breathed. It exists to challenge civilizations, to force evolution through uncertainty. Tanya's voice came through softly. So what's the final challenge? Aria turned to the control panel and, with a deep breath, silenced the protocol. Everything stopped. The ship floated silent. The Skirn shimmered, waiting. Then Aria did something no one expected. She spoke, not in code or data or probability, but in raw story. A human tale, the myth of Icarus, but told in reverse, of a being that dove into darkness to understand the light. She spoke of love and failure, of persistence through absurdity. She told the story of humanity's foolishness, of their chaos and curiosity. She told the story of them, and the Skirn listened. It responded not with destruction, but with a shift, a pulse of understanding. Around them, reality shimmered. Broken laws were rewritten, not by force, but by mutual exchange. The anomaly's edge began to reverse, folding back on itself, leaving behind stabilized space. Holy hell, Tanya whispered. We're changing it. No, Aria said. We're completing it. The Skirn had never been a villain. It was the galaxy's reset switch, appearing when civilizations grew too rigid, too dependent on predictability. The Concord, for all its brilliance, had forgotten how to wonder. Humanity hadn't. They had failed, stumbled, improvised, and in doing so, offered something no algorithm could, meaning. As the Skirn faded, the crew of the Deadless saw visions. Not hallucinations, but offerings. Future models, new sciences, impossible architectures. Gifts of perspective. The anomaly had learned from them, and it had taught something in return. When the Deadless emerged, the galaxy held its breath. Earth's ship had gone into the anomaly and come back out. Whole, alive, victorious, in a way no one had dared imagine. The Skirn Anomaly dissolved across the stars, collapsing like a dream ending. And the Concord changed. The galaxy held its breath. Across trillions of kilometers, in nebulae and orbital stations, hollow moons and sun-braided fortresses, species watched the news feeds flicker. There had been no blast, no collapse. Just a subtle shimmer, like the whole sky had exhaled, and the Skirn was gone. Not defeated, transformed. In the heart of the Concord's central hub, where thought and matter danced as one, the assembly convened. For the first time in a millennia, the chamber was silent, not because of calculation or politics, but because no one knew what to say. And then they said one name. Humanity. The word echoed awkwardly at first, like an inside joke trying to become serious. But no one laughed this time. On the platform stood Dr. Aria Sen, flanked by her crew. Raj still holding his notepad like a talisman, Tanya standing like a storm held back by sheer will, and the deadless team behind them in patched uniforms and analog tech strapped to their waists. Zenkar hovered near, a proud glimmer running through his luminous form. "You have done," Zaratvel finally spoke, "what none of us could, what none of us would have imagined attempting." "I didn't do it alone," Aria replied. "We had to unlearn everything we were taught, and we had to fail a lot. But every failure brought us closer to what the Skirn was trying to say." "It spoke?" asked a crystalline delegate. "Not in words. In mirrors," Raj said. "It reflected our assumptions back at us, turned logic into knots. Our response wasn't to untie the knots. It was to dance with them." A murmur rippled across the chamber. An advanced species, the Feral Minds, uploaded their observation logs in real time. Gravitational distortions matching rhythmic pulses from the deadless, anomaly behavior aligning with symbolic inputs. Proof. And then came the requests. One species asked for access to the human error protocol. Another requested joint improvisational exercises. A third asked to study Earth's cultural archives, not just science, but myths, art, chaos theory, punk music, surrealist cinema. Humanity, once a laughingstock, now found itself in demand. Not for its weapons, not for its ships, for its imagination. Weeks passed, then months. The Concord entered a new phase, not one of pure logic or quantum perfection, but of creative inquiry. Institutions emerged blending art and physics, emotion and computation. New disciplines spread across the stars. Resonant engineering, machines built to respond emotionally to inputs, adjusting based on mood maps. Paradox strategy, using mutually contradictory premises to break stalemates and avoid predictable conflict outcomes. Narrative physics, crafting metaphysical models through story logic, blending cultural narrative with theoretical frameworks. At the center of this cultural upheaval stood Earth. Where once humanity had observed from the edges of the assembly, they were now seated at its heart. In a private garden on Concord Prime, grown from dream-responsive flora, Aria and Zenkar met under a sky that flickered between real and metaphorical. "You must know," Zenkar said, "not all approve." "I'm not surprised," Aria replied, sipping from a cup shaped like an ancient Earth teacup, but filled with star brew. "This wasn't about proving humans were better, just different." "You didn't tame the Skirn," Zenkar said. "You changed the terms of survival." Aria leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "What if that's the real test? Not just survival of the fittest, but survival of the flexible." "The Concord is no longer one mind," Zenkar said, "but many. You have redefined our expectations of civilization." She laughed softly. "We still lose Wi-Fi if it rains too hard." "Perhaps," Zenkar said, glowing faintly, "it is your very incompletion that is your strength." Earth's skies were never the same. Ships arrived not to monitor, but to learn. Galactic citizens walked alongside humans, attending open workshops on chaos theory, conducted in street cafes. Children played with alien devices that responded to play, not input. The human error protocol became open source. It evolved into something more. The Vanguard Network, a galaxy-wide coalition of beings committed to embracing unpredictability as a tool for growth. The name was symbolic, and yet accurate. Humanity wasn't just part of the Concord now. They were its edge, its curiosity, its resilience. The galaxy didn't need them to be perfect. It needed them to be human. On the steps of the United Galactic Assembly, Aria gave a speech. Not long, not grand, but unforgettable. When the Skirn came, the smartest minds in the galaxy tried to outthink it, she said. But it wasn't a puzzle. It was a mirror. We stared into it, and it showed us everything we didn't understand about ourselves. We stopped trying to fight it with certainty, and we started responding with wonder. Because sometimes the only way to make sense of chaos is to create something beautiful inside it. Not all of our solutions will work, but every mistake teaches us something no perfection ever could. We are not your last resort anymore. We are your first step into the unknown. And somewhere, deep in the fabric of space, where old anomalies had once fed on certainty, something new stirred. Not chaos, potential.